Hi friends, in arm balances and in handstands, the most important muscle group to work on are the wrist flexors. And the most important joint to focus on building mobility in are the wrists. When working with arm balances and handstands, we must think about what their names suggest is that the wrists and hands are our foundations in these poses and in these shapes. What is interacting with the ground when you are in arm balances and handstands? It's going to be your hands. So really working on building strength is going to add to that longevity and sustainability of your practice. So we are first going to get started off by bringing the hands towards each other and then just drawing some figure eights with your wrists. Rolling out through the wrists. And really for any kind of practice where you're weight bearing in the upper body, it's so important to work the wrists. And then switch directions. I know that switching directions could be a little bit challenging, but this is a good practice for your brain as well. Really challenging your coordination. Oftentimes when you ask people what the most important muscle when working on our arm balances and our handstands, a lot of people will say the core. Well, the core is spherical, it has a circumference, and it wraps around your whole body, so don't forget the back. But when really building up to hold arm balances and handstands, we really want to focus on getting this strength into the wrist flexors. So working on our wrist cars, you're going to place your elbows just along the sides of your hips, and your fingertips are going to point down. Try to make sure that this movement is coming from the wrist, and I know it's tempting to let the fingers do all the work. Then you're going to bring it to the side. Think of it as if you're drawing circles with your wrists. Take 3 rounds of this at your own pace. Then you're going to switch directions. Great. Now place your hands directly underneath your shoulders. So the wrists are going to be directly underneath your shoulders, your knees directly underneath your hips. So externally rotate your arms to begin. So really wrapping the triceps back and the eyes of the elbows spinning forward. And circle over the wrists, adding pressure into the fingertips, almost as if you're clawing through the mat. And switch directions. When working on building stability and strength in the wrists and the wrist flexors, it's really important to explore all the different directions that the wrist as a joint is designed to move at. So we are in this position where our hands are on the ground into this extension, but the motion is really trying to get the hands into flexion, right? So you're gripping the mat and pushing down through the palms. And go ahead and you're going to flip the grip so that the fingers are pointing towards you. Try to make sure that this flipped grip is shoulder distance apart. The tendency is to bring it a lot closer, but you really want to try to open it up just a tiny bit more. Take gentle sway side to side. One of the best strengthening drills for working into the wrist flexors and working into the whole body that is required for arm balances and handstands are planks. So if you really want to progress in this movement, you're going to step your left foot back and your right foot back, and you're going to hold this plank by pushing the ground away, pulling the crown of your head forward, really pushing out through the shoulders. And then lower one knee down at a time. Good job. I know that's not easy. So providing a really nice stretch for the forearms. You are softly and with control going to lean your glutes back towards your heels. Maybe it goes up all the way, but only explore a range that feels nice and good for you. Then go ahead and position your hands so that the fingers are pointing towards opposite sides of the mat. And you're also going to just sway side to side and maybe draw those circles again. Again, really moving with control. If you want to really work on challenging yourself, you could always walk your knees further back. This is especially really great if you are working on those press handstands. And then switch the hands so that the tops of the hands are on the ground, palms facing up towards the sky. And try to straighten up your arms to the best of your ability. Excuse me. Good. So coming into that tabletop position again and entering our finger push-ups. So you're going to shift your weight so that the shoulders are past the wrists or just directly above it. Then you're going to press the earth away with your fingertips. And on your exhale, lower down. Push it up. Take 10 of these. Really focus on pressing down with the fingertips. And you could feel the muscles, those wrist flexors really firing up here, creating that activation. Good. So you are going to come up onto the right fingertips, then the left. Lower down the right, lower down the left. Come up to the right, come up to the left. Lower down the right, lower down the left. Switch sides, come up onto the left, come up to the right. Lower down on the left, lower down on the right. Good job. One more time. Come up onto the left, come up to the right. Lower down on the left, lower down onto the right. Great. So again, as I said earlier, the best strengthening drill for building that awareness and total body experience is going to be your plank pose. So come up onto your plank. Try to make this plank introverted in nature by using and recruiting the strength of your pushing muscles. So your hands are resisting the ground as your shoulders are in protraction. Think, separate the shoulders while engaging your glutes. Then you're going to shift your weight forward. Maybe the shoulders pass the wrists. This is particularly great if you are working into those press handstands and arm balances as well, because in arm balances, it's all about shifting the weight forward, and all of that weight is coming onto the hands. So really getting the wrists used to carrying your body weight is an absolute foundational requirement. Maybe you even take those circles and lower your knees down. Now we're going to build some more activation into the wrist flexors. So bring your arms up overhead, elevating the shoulders. And you're going to turn your hands, open your hands up, and then turn it into a fist, and then pulse it up. Typically, you would take 30 reps of this pulsing action. And if you really feel the wrist flexors, they're really firing up here. This is going to be fantastic for every kind of pushing motion in your yoga practice. And in yoga, there's a lot of pushing. So it's really great to build that longevity into the wrist flexors and into the wrist joints. After you've taken 30 of those, maybe you even roll out the wrists and see how much more space that you've created in your wrists. Great job. So if you have a block close by, or if you even have a table or a chair or a book, you are just simply going to position your fingers onto that surface and just take your right wrist into that extension. But at the same time, you're resisting the surface by pushing against the surface with your fingertips. Good. Make your way to side 2. Great. Now set your block off to the side. Another great thing that I love to do in my handstand and arm balancing practice is I like to build strength into the wrist flexors and mobility by, you could use a very, very light weight for this, or you could use something like ankle weights. And you're gonna just roll it up if you have ankle weights. And you want to keep this right arm as stable as you can and letting this motion come from the wrist. So you're going to play around with teetering between the motions of extension and flexion of the wrist. Try to go slow here, moving with control, and just bringing an awareness to your foundations. And in your foundations are the hands. And you would switch sides and try to notice which wrist is a lot more spacious in its nature. Again, playing with that extension and into that flexion. Great. After you've done 10 on each side, set those off to the side. In handstands and in arm balances, our wrists live typically in two camps. So if you press your forearms together and your wrists together and you open up your hands, you're either going to live in the Y camp or this T camp. And if you live in the Y camp, that means that you need to spend more time stretching out the wrist flexors. And if you live in that T camp, you need to spend more time strengthening and building stability into the wrist flexors. And what that does is it's going to give you information. It's going to give you a point of reference as to where you are, because all of us are in very, very, very different pathways, very different experiences when it comes to arm balances and in handstands. But it's always great to acknowledge where you are in your journey and to work on building from your limitations, because growth comes from working with your limitations, as my teacher Patrick Beach always says. So I hope this practice has helped you. If you were looking to recover your wrist flexors and your wrists, it's always great that after you do a practice that involves any kind of arm balances and in handstands, always great to get a foam roller, tennis ball, or something like this roller. It's an OTP roller from the Franklin method. And roll out your forearms and play around with turning your fingers open and closing off into a fist. And of course, you want to explore different areas of your wrist flexors and into the forearms. This is a really yummy, yummy way to release those wrist flexors, because after every arm balance practice or handstand practice, if you feel those wrist flexors, they are on fire and they are really, really, really active. So have fun with your practice, especially when it comes to the arm balances and handstands. Remember, always spend time bringing conscious awareness to your wrist flexors. Those are your foundations. Saying that the core is the foundations of your handstands, even though the core is very important, but it's almost very similar to looking at a house and saying that the curtains are the most important feature of that house, when in reality, it's the foundation of a structure or of a building, such as a house, that is the most important component of building that practice. So thank you so much for joining. If this has helped you in any way, please drop a like, comment, and subscribe to this page. Good luck and have fun taking flight in your practice. Thank you.